So I'd like to say miigwech and now invite the Honorable Patty Hajdu, Minister of Indigenous Services Canada, to make her presentation to the Assembly. Minister Hajdu.
Thank you, everybody, for welcoming me. It's great to be with you, even if it has to be virtually. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. I saw you looking out into the audience. I'm on the screen. I only have 15 minutes now, so I apologize because I don't have a lot of time, but I will just highlight some of the priorities that we're working on jointly. And I will be able to come back, of course, to speak with Chiefs of Ontario at any time about your priorities and other items that you want to speak about. I'm here today with you from the traditional territory and unceded territory of the Algonquin people. But most of you know that I live in the Robinson Superior Treaty area on the traditional territory of the Fort William First Nation. And so, again, I wish I could be there in person, but the House is still sitting. I do want to thank Regional Chief Hare and the Chiefs of Ontario for the invitation to say a few words, and of course to the Independent First Nations for hosting this year's Assembly. I think we're all looking forward to the time where we won't have as much virtual, and I certainly will be looking forward to seeing people face to face over the summer, and certainly getting out into Ontario and visiting some of the regions and areas that I have not had an opportunity to visit yet. I know your gathering this year is Every Child Matters, a New Legacy, and the theme is really appropriate. And I can't tell you how much I share the passion in that theme, and what an opportunity that we have right now as partners to make the future for every child that much better. I also want to say that I know that the 7 generations teaching is something that Indigenous people have held on to despite the ongoing and systemic colonization that Indigenous communities have faced, and Indigenous peoples, First Nations peoples have faced at the hands of our colonial government, of the Canadian colonial government. I know that the philosophy of 7 generations is still strong amongst the leaders and the community members that I've met, and I believe in that philosophy as well. I think that there is a lot that we can do to protect the next 7 generations and to reflect on what the previous generations taught us. So on that, I think the first, really good piece of news is how we're working so well towards a final agreement in terms of the CHRT ruling. And I wanted to talk a little bit more specifically about that work. Since January, as you know, we've been working with the parties on the negotiation of the final settlement agreements, and on compensation, we've been working with the AFN and council representing the Mishoom and Trout class actions. On long-term reform, we've been working with you, the Chiefs of Ontario, the Assembly of First Nations, the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society, and of course, Anishinaabe-Aski Nation, towards settling these agreements once and for all. And so while these negotiations continue, we have begun some implementation. And I think that is an indication of our commitment to making sure that, as I said earlier, we have an opportunity to create better outcomes for young people right now. So as of April 1st, Canada began implementing enhancements to the First Nations Child and Family Services Program, again, to ensure that no child faces the discrimination that was rightfully found to be true by the tribunal. So, for example, we've increased funding for prevention activities. The total amount is calculated at $2,500 per resident on reserve and in the Yukon, and this is per total First Nations population. We've expanded funding for First Nations representative services beyond Ontario to all provinces and to the Yukon. And we're now funding post-majority care services for those who age out of care or formerly in care up to their 26th birthday. And that means that First Nations youth who, through no fault of their own, have had a very rocky start, have access to the kinds of supports that will help them heal and continue their journey in hopefully better ways, and things like life skills training, help with health and wellness, financial supports, educational supports. And of course, we continue to work with Ontario First Nations leaders to work through very specific issues. 2 weeks ago, I attended the inaugural symposium of the National Assembly of Remote Communities. And this was really such an honor for me to be able to attend that inaugural symposium. You know, this is, I think, incredible leadership by Ontario Chiefs, by Anishinaabe to ensure that the issues of remoteness that have added an extra layer of discrimination for First Nations that find themselves far away from larger settlements, larger communities, have equity in the ways that they're funded, in the ways that their services are provided. And I can tell you that as someone from Northern Ontario, I get it. I understand that there are incredible challenges and unique needs when you live in communities that are further away from cities and even from smaller cities like Thunder Bay. And so I try to help my colleagues who are very urban, oftentimes in big cities. Their ridings might be an hour long, while as mine is 4 hours by car. And of course, some of my northern colleagues, really can't see every part of their riding, even within a year, without multiple flights. I try to help my colleagues understand, and certainly I think they are really starting to understand just how remoteness affects all kinds of things, including how difficult it can be to address those historic deficits in infrastructure, how we recruit people and retain people to provide the services that we need, and how we deliver services to communities. So there's a lot of work underway, and we're making really good progress. Another area I think that really fits in with the theme is the work that we're doing to continue to provide support under Jordan's Principle. And I know that you have heard me speak before. First Nations families and communities are in the best position to support their children and youth. And as you know, this government has been committed to the full implementation of Jordan's Principle. So I was really thrilled to see that under Jordan's Principle, over $220 million in funding for products and services were flowed into 21-22 year, and it went directly to supporting First Nations children and youth in the Ontario region. We're going to continue this work, as you know, to make sure that kids get the kinds of help, supports, and specialized care that they need, and make sure that kids have the best chance at success. And then related to that, and I think very related to your theme, is the work that we've all been doing on Bill C-92, which is the Act to Respect First Nations, Inuit, and Métis Children, Youth, and Families. It's really about self-determination and communities regaining the control that they rightfully should have over the care and support and protection of their own children. And so it's kind of exciting to see that there's 17 active coordination agreement discussion tables established under the framework of the Act, and 2 completed coordination agreements. And this past March, as one of my first official duties, it was such a real honor to visit Wabsumong Independent Nations. We signed the coordination agreement, and the ceremony itself was just so stunningly beautiful. I want to thank the chief and council and the many leaders and elders that wrote the customary code, that persisted. And I want to also thank Ontario, because in fact, Ontario was a good partner, was at the signing ceremony, and is committed to making sure that Wabsumong has the support, the resources, and the mechanisms needed to make sure that they can be the primary providers of care for their children and have good partners at the federal and provincial table. I know that KI First Nation and 10 other First Nations have provided formal notice of intent to exercise jurisdiction over child and family services. And I'm really hopeful there's going to be more, and that we'll be able to celebrate with you as more communities and nations do assert their jurisdiction over child and family services. This is the kind of work that I think is going to support your theme of Every Child Matters, and will create a new legacy for families and for communities. It's not going to be without its hard work, as I know you know, but I want you to know that you have partners in the federal government to do that work, and we'll also defend those rights vigorously whenever they're challenged. So, Madam Chair, I'm going to stop here. There's so much more I could talk about, but due to the tight timeline, I do want to just leave a moment for a couple points or questions and feedback, and then I will have to leave very shortly, but I apologize.
Thank you, Minister Hajdu. We do have a couple of questions. I'll invite Ogama Pelche to begin the questions, and then on the virtual we have Chief Wilfred King. Ogima Pelche. Mike 2.
Mike 2. Okay, I can hear myself now. So, Miigwech Minister, I've been asked to bring forward a very important question on behalf of the Chiefs of Ontario and more importantly, the survivors of day school. And we want to ensure that we make the request directly to yourself and to Gowlings to amend the day school settlement. The process hasn't been very supportive to many of the survivors. Many of them have feel that they're being re-traumatized as part of the application process, and many of them have not been getting the compensation that they deserve. And we're requesting that this issue be fixed. We feel that the process is unfair to survivors, and survivors are not getting the justice that they're asking for. We do need action immediately because we understand that the deadline to get an application in is coming very shortly on July the 13th. And what we're asking for is that many people, they've ended up with the lowest compensation when in fact they were abused and they are owed higher compensation levels. The settlement process has absolutely no way for them to fix that problem. Many of them were encouraged to put a check mark onto level 1. And as part of the check mark to level 1, they also included a narrative of their experiences, but because of the check mark that was placed there, they weren't eligible to have a review done to see whether or not they could have been compensated at a higher level. So one, people need to change the levels, but there doesn't seem to be any willingness by either the federal government or the legal counsel representing the class action to take this matter before the court. The second issue is that people needed local supports. Supports that were available were non-existent for a period of time, which resulted in many people making the application without understanding what it is that they were putting their name forward. The only thing that was available to them were call centers, and the call centers were very unsupportive, including many individuals not receiving any calls back. So no one is actually there in person to help people with the forms. First Nations have been going way out of their way to do this, unpaid, and we feel that the administrators of this process have been getting paid very handsomely to do this. And thirdly, the deadline itself, we're requesting that this to be extended. We feel that an extension for 2 years is proper and warranted, based upon the fact that this process started during COVID, the COVID pandemic, and there was an inability of many of our elders and elderly population to go and visit in person with the social counselors and the supports within the community to help them with their applications. So we feel that this deadline is something that we're requesting yourself as the minister to support the survivors, to provide them those basic levels of support to ensure that a deadline is extended for this application of this class action suit in the day schools. You may ask, why didn't we raise this earlier? But in fact, many of us have. Many calls from leadership, communities, councils, many survivors, they have been asking for supports and this extension. So my pointed question to Minister Hajdu is, will you commit to making these changes to approaching Gowlings, as well as the courts, in asking for these changes to be made? And we would prefer that, because the deadline is coming up by July the 13th, we would prefer to have an answer prior to then, so that if we need to regroup it into another form, then we will do that. And certainly you're going to be receiving a letter signed by all of the chiefs that have been here in the assembly, a joint letter, which is similar to a letter that we know is coming right across the country from other regional chiefs' assemblies. So, miigwech.
Miigwech Ogimog Pelche. Minister Haidu.
Maybe I can take a couple questions at once, and because my time is so tight.
We're going to invite then Chief Wilfred King and then microphone 4.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Minister. Can you hear him?
First of all, Minister Hajdu, I'm quite disappointed, and I'm going to rain on your parade today. And the reason I'm raining on your parade today is that I wrote you a letter. I also wrote to Minister Miller and also Minister Lamenti on the Gull Bay First Nation larger land-based claim, along with 3 other First Nations in our territory that have submitted a very similar claim. You wrote back and said, I don't have time to meet you, Chief. I haven't heard back from Minister Miller or Minister Lamenti as well. This claim, we've negotiated with your bureaucrats to get a resolution to. We put our litigation in abeyance to come to a resolution. And we were told by your negotiators that after the election in 2021, September 2021, that we will seek a mandate from cabinet to get this moving forward and get it resolved. It's been 9 months since the election, and yet there's no movement on your part or the part of the Liberals government. I'm very disappointed and very disturbed that the fact that you represent a lot of First Nations in your riding, and a lot of First Nations supported you and your Liberal government in getting elected. And for you to ignore communities in your own riding, and is it because you've gotten in as a second term and that you're no longer concerned about a re-election? You know, I am very disappointed in this government, this Liberal government. In fact, you know, it's quite disturbing, and it's a shame that your government continually ignores valid land claims across our region. And I'm not happy right now. I'm very disappointed. And, you know, for you to come here and boast about all the good things you're doing, I don't think so. And I hope you take this message back to your cabinet that this is wrong what you're doing. It's shameful on your part as a minister. We've been waiting for this mandate for 9 months, and yet we don't know when this mandate is going to happen. But yet we've come to the table in good faith to get this resolved. And I get a letter from you saying, I got no time to meet with you, Chief King, or your communities, the 4 communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief King. I'm going to invite microphone 4. Anna Betty.
Miigwech, thank you. Wache, Minister Hajdu. And I also amplify and support the comments that were made by my colleagues. I am the proxy for Cat Lake First Nation. And some time ago, Minister Hajdu, as well as I wrote a letter to you as well to say that we wanted to meet with you to discuss and to work with you to implement a plan to address the opiate pandemic that has impacted many of our communities. And as of today, we have not received that commitment to sit down with you, and much less to get a letter from you. So I am demanding, I am requesting, with respect, to get a response from you and to confirm a meeting, and as well as to confirm a meeting with Chief Russell Wesley and the chiefs of Sulakaut Health Authority. Miigwech.
Miigwech. Minister Haidu, we got one more question. Microphone 3.
Miigwech, Vera. Buju, Minister Haidu. I have a question about Bill C-92, but also about just funding overall. I think there's a lot of good practical give and take that's happening at Bill C-92 tables, and Miigwech for giving good mandates and instructions to your teams. But I mean, there's just something that's common sense in the way that Jordan's principal funding can be accessed for our off-reserve members. That should also be happening with child welfare funding. And I really believe that a similar mandate for child welfare funding for our members. I come from Couchiching First Nation, and it's no fault of ours that we don't have the housing or the infrastructure to house our 3,000 members, and only 30% live on reserve. But we certainly are responsible for all of our children, no matter where they live. And that funding should be accessible to our governments as you say in the Bill C-92 Indigenous governing bodies. Miigwech.
Miigwech. Minister Haidu.
Well, thank you very much for the frank conversation. First of all, to Chief Pelletier, I will communicate those current concerns to Minister Miller. I know that he's aware of these concerns and he is looking into options, given that it is with Gowlings now. But it is disturbing to hear that survivors are not being treated through a trauma-informed lens, and certainly would not be something that this government would want to see happen. So I will make sure that Minister Miller hears those concerns, and I will share them with him directly. Chief King, listen, I understand the frustration. These are negotiations that have been complex and they've been ongoing and very lengthy. I am really hopeful that we'll be able to have a negotiating mandate to continue very soon, and so I would stay tuned. And obviously, this also is under Minister Miller's file, but because it is within my riding, in fact, the majority of the communities in the process that you're talking about are within my riding. I've kept very close tabs, and I will continue to press the government to be able to sit down very soon with the negotiating mandate that we need so that we can get resolution. It's a complex piece of work, and I know you know that, but I want to thank you for persisting. I will say I'm disturbed by the 2 comments about correspondence not being proper or timely. As you probably understand, a minister's office receives a lot of correspondence, but the fact that 2 people have spoken about the correspondence not being collegial or accommodating or even there at all, it concerns me. So I have raised it with my chief of staff, and we'll make sure that we fix that. That is to me, I mean, listen, I come from a pre-politics world of customer service, and that's extremely poor customer service. So that's not acceptable to me. And to Deputy Grand Chief Anna Betty, listen, you know that I too am passionate about mental health and substance use. And whether we're talking about Cat Lake or whether we're talking about writ large for the Ontario region, I'm happy to sit down with you and hear what your ideas are. And this is a good time because there are hundreds of millions of dollars in budget 2022 that are very specific to Indigenous-led mental health and wellness. And now's the time to be feeding into that so that we can make sure that as those monies are spent in community, that they have the maximum flexibility to be able to fund programs and supports and services and approaches that communities think will be useful. If you think that I have the answer, I want to tell everybody I don't have the answer. I come from a family that struggles with substance use. I personally have struggled with substance use, and so have many people that I love in my family. So I don't have the answer, but I do think that the answer is not going to come from the federal government. And that's why the work I'm doing right now is to try to design the money to be as flexible as possible so communities can use their own wisdom their own knowledge and their own needs to derive that those investments in a way that is going to make the most sense. So, Madam Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity, and thanks to all the participants and the questioners for your frankness. And I think that's how we will move forward together, is to be able to have these very open and honest conversations.
One final question. R. Donald Miracle, Chief of Tanganaga, would like to ask a question. He's going to do it in.
Okay, I'll make it quick there, Minister. The $6 billion that's part of the class action settlement for the water class action, is the $6 billion going to be new money, or is this money has to be provided within the existing money that's already been appropriated by Parliament?
Minister Hajdu.
It's a blend of money. Some of it has already been bookmarked for water upgrades. And of course, there's new money for the compensation. So, you know, the commitment of the government to end the boil water advisories is very sincere. If I'd had more time, I would have been able to speak about it in my remarks. But I will be reaching out personally to each First Nation that's still under boil water advisories. I've begun to do that. As you know, Chief King, you and I have spoken, for example, to understand how best I can be of support to lift those advisories. It's different for every community, as you know, but we'll make sure that we have the right inputs in place to get those lifts alleviated as soon as possible. And on the compensation piece, obviously, you know, we will be there to make sure that that unfolds in the right way. And I've already instructed my team, as they work with the third-party administrator, to make sure that it is designed in a way that doesn't re-victimize and re-traumatize people. So I am certainly hoping I won't hear comments like I heard from Chief Pelletier today about boarding schools. And now I really do have to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We do want to thank you and have a great rest of the afternoon. Miigwech.
Thank you.
Where do we go from here? So on my agenda, we brought ourselves to the point of everybody loves resolutions. Yeah, that's yours. Resolutions. In our resolutions package, you have a number of resolutions. The first one I want to deal with is called the Canada Water Agency. It's a resolution that's moved by Chief Shining Turtle. It's seconded by Chief R. Donald Miracle. It has the whereas, and then it says that. So it's just Chief Shining Turtle. Is he on the virtual platform there? Chief Shining Turtle.
He is here.
All right, thank you.
Be
So
wished.
we're at the point where it says, therefore be it resolved that we, the Chiefs in Assembly, direct the Coup Environment Unit with guidance from the Chiefs Committee on the Environment to enter dialogue with governments to ensure secure financial resources and capacity for stage 2 engagement on the Canada Water Agency to further identify First Nations priorities, support capacity building to engage in water-related issues and stewardship, and to support assertions of First Nations jurisdiction regarding water. 2, providing funding for Phase 2 is secured. Direct the Coup Environment Unit with guidance from the Chiefs Committee on Environment to conduct workshops in communities and provide funding in conjunction with representatives from the provincial territorial organizations and independent First Nations. 3, direct the Chiefs Committee on Environment to report back to the annual Chiefs Assembly in 2023 on progress made in furtherance of the directions of this resolution. 4, the above to be without prejudice to any other current or future drinking water programs in which individual First Nations or their organizations are engaged. That is the resolution. Would Chief Shining Turtle or Chief, the Seconder, Chief R. Donald Miracle, wish to speak to the resolution?
I'll defer to Chief Maracle. Thank you.
Chief Miracle. He was just here. Chief Shining Turtle, you really want to speak to the resolution?
Yeah, the importance of water is life, and the importance of treaty rights and our Aboriginal rights, and that water was always been ours is should never be understated. I think it's important that we take carriage of the situation and put things in our own hands. And this is one important topic where our women, our children, our future is completely dependent on water. So we have an opportunity with the Chiefs of Ontario through the Environment Unit to make those engagements happen. And I look forward to the support of the Assembly to make this important matter part of our identity, part of our DNA. Miigwech Kibizindoyak.
Miigwech, Chief Shining Turtle. Chief Miracle, would you like to speak to the resolution? Resolution 2209A. Miigwech, it's been moved and seconded. It's been moved and seconded. The resolution has been moved and seconded. Questions called? Anyone opposed to the resolution? Anyone opposed to the resolution? Anyone opposed to the resolution? Nobody on the virtual platform? Anybody abstaining from the resolution? Anyone abstaining from the resolution? Anyone abstaining from the resolution? Nobody on the platforms abstaining? All of those in favor of the resolution, raise your hand. Keep it way up there. Okay, and we have 5 on the virtual platform. The resolution is carried. So that's the way their team how resolutions are done. Who's up next?
We had to flip a coin here. So the next resolution is 2210A, and I'm going to see if we can put it up on the screen. It's titled Species at Risk. The mover is Chief Lester Anaquat. I want to see if Chief Anaquat is in the room, or thank you. Seconder is Chief Charles Sampson. I believe there, proxy. Okay, so we have proxy for Chief Sampson. So the resolution, again, I will not read the preamble. I'll go to therefore be it resolved on the second page. It reads, therefore be it resolved that we, the Chiefs in Assembly, 1, direct the Chiefs Committee on Environment and COO, Chiefs of Ontario Environment Unit, to enter dialogue with governments to seek financial resources and capacity to engage in a First Nations rights-based response to the biodiversity crisis and species at risk. Number 2, direct the Chiefs Committee on Environment and COO Environment Unit to seek financial resources to provide technical and training support to Ontario First Nations on species at risk and biodiversity conservation. Number 3, direct the Chiefs Committee on Environment and COO Environment Unit to further engage with the Government of Canada in relation to the Sustainable Development Goals and the intersection of the biodiversity crisis, the climate crisis, and the freshwater crisis. Number 4, Chiefs Committee on Environment will report to the next Special Chiefs in Assembly on progress made in furtherance of the directions in this resolution and with a timeline for implementation. So the mover and the seconder are here. Any comments from the mover? Any comments? No comments? From the seconder? Any comments? No comments. Floor is open. Any comments or questions?
I have a question.
Second call. Any comments or questions? If you're on the Zoom session, just unmute and go ahead and speak.
Hello,
Third
can you
call.
hear me? Can you hear me?
Oh, I hear somebody, sounded like Chief King, but I'm not sure.
Yes, it is.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm not sure if there's any other resolutions pertaining to, and it's sort of related to this topic. We're all experiencing the pandemic, and we're looking at COVID and the sources of COVID and how it has impacted the world, you might as well say. And if you recall, when they called it the Spanish flu back in the 1920s, that wiped out a lot of our communities. And it came from, I believe it was Kansas in the United States, and it was US Army personnel that were the first ones getting sick. And it was because of they thought it was, well, they knew it came from the game farms. And we're seeing more and more game farms come up across our territories. And I brought this up at the AFN. I believe Grand Chief Kluwani Adamic was in charge of this issue. And what I've seen and I've witnessed, and I'm not a very old guy, nor am I a very young guy, but I've seen species that were not native to our territory in our territories now. And there's many species that have moved north because of global warming. And one of the key things that we're looking at as well is the deer farms in Quebec, in which there's some really, really serious diseases that these deers carry, and it could be impacting our moose and native deer populations. And I think there has to be something done about this, and how invasive species have wiped out native species that we once relied on. And I'm not sure if there's a resolution to this effect, but I'm hopeful that the Chiefs of Ontario Environment body would look into some of those issues. And again, I go back to the issue of the pandemic and COVID-19 and where it came from. I know they're blaming bats in China and so forth, but I think game farms, and there's a renowned scientist at the University of Saskatchewan, Harvard graduate, that talked about these pandemics are coming from game farms. And I don't think there's enough done about game farms. So it's just a commentary. Miigwech, thank you.
Miigwech, Chief King. So I'm looking through our resolutions that are coming up. I don't think there's anything specific to what you're asking. No specific resolution to that issue. But I'm going to look to the staff to see if there's any comments, the staff that were working specifically on this resolution. I don't know if there are any comments, or the mover and the seconder of the resolution. Any comments to that question? Is there a need for any changes or?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not asking for any changes. I just think it's a commentary. Maybe next year, hopefully we could have a resolution prepared. Miigwech, thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Miigwech. Any more comments? Any more comments? Third time? Question's been called. Thank you. Any opposition to the resolution? I see none. Any opposition? Third call. Any opposition? Any abstentions? I have to look back to the virtual forum. Any abstentions? Second call. Any abstentions? Nothing there. Thank you. All in favor of the resolution, raise your hand. Thank you. Resolution is carried. So we'll move right along to the next resolution. Now, we have a number of resolutions, some that might have been introduced late, so there's a process that we have to follow. So I'm going to get co-speaker Vera to give me a nudge if I'm going in the wrong direction. But I've got the next one that I have is Resolution 2211A. If we can have that put up on the screen, please. Resolution 2211A. And the subject is opposition to governments of Canada and Ontario's pan-Indigenous approach to First Nations issues and funding. The mover is Chief Lester Anaquat, who is here. Seconder, Chief R. Donald Maracle, who also is here. I will go to page 2 of the resolution. It reads, therefore be it resolved that we, the Chiefs in Assembly, 1, call on the governments of Canada and Ontario to immediately cease its pan-Indigenous approach to funding programs and services, and to develop First Nations-led approaches that are separate from those negotiated with the Métis and Inuit. 2, call on the Ontario Regional Chief to coordinate political level discussions amongst the First Nation leadership and relevant Canada and Ontario ministers to advocate for the establishment and joint development of distinctions-based First Nation models, which are to include First Nation-specific resource allocations. And 3, note that this is without prejudice to any work being undertaken by First Nations or First Nations organizations, and is without prejudice to the inherent and treaty rights of all First Nations in Ontario. The mover, any comments? No? Seconder? No? Any comments? Okay. Any comments from the floor? Second call, any comments from the floor or on the Zoom session?
Question.
Question's been called. Well, give me a chance. Third call. Any comments? No comments. Thank you. Okay, question's been called. Thank you. Any opposition? Any opposition? Third call, any opposition? I see none. I'll get a holler from behind if there's an opposition in virtual. Any abstentions? Second call, any abstentions? And final call, any abstentions? I hear none. All in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you very much. Resolution is carried. So we'll turn it over for 2 more resolutions, I believe.
All right, so this is Resolution 2212A, affirmation of the First Nation education sovereignty in response to interim funding approach and support for First Nations with Schools Collective First Nation Education Self-Determination Framework Initiative pilot proposal. So moving to the therefore be it resolved. Therefore be it resolved that we, the Chiefs in Assembly, support the First Nation with Schools Collectives plans outlined in the Education Self-Determination Framework pilot proposal to ISK and CERNAC, primarily requesting that A, the current FNWSC ISK CERNAC Joint Education Technical Table, JET, have a clear mandate and staff with delegated authorities affirmed in the signed terms of reference for the purpose of entering into negotiations regarding education jurisdiction subject matter, with the intention to negotiate recognition, cooperative intentions, the application of agreed upon standards, financial measures, dispute resolution, and other relevant matters. And B, the current FNWSC ISK CERNAC JET remain an intergovernmental relations mechanism outside of the current regional education agreement process of ISK and the recognition of Indigenous rights and self-determination tables RIRC process of CERNAC. 2, authorize and direct the regional chief to support the First Nations with schools collective plans outlined in the First Nation Education Self-Determination Framework Initiative pilot proposal to ISK and CERNAC, and write to the respective ministers confirming the support of the Chiefs in Assembly for the FSNWSC's initiatives as set out in the attached framework, and to advocate for AFN supports from the Assembly of First Nations for the pilot proposal. And 3, the above is without prejudice to any other current or future First Nation collective plans put forward by First Nations or their organizations. So the mover on this resolution is Chief Ojomanunki of Saginaw Anishinaabeg, and the seconder, Chief Jacqueline French, Chippewas of the Thames First Nations. So I'd invite the mover, the seconder, to provide any comments. Chief Allen, are you in the room? Yep.
Yes, here.
And Chief Jacqueline French? Okay. Any comments?
I just wanted to share with some who may not be familiar with some of the work that we've been doing, and I really thank the group that we're working with who captured some of the comments and discussion that we've had in relation to reaching the point where we're at now and where we need to go. And I thank them for capturing some of those comments that I'll share with you today. Our learning approaches are rooted in our language. Thinking about the spirit and intent of the work that we do in education, we as a collective of communities come from different nations. We feel we have a unique opportunity to work together to teach our children what was denied. and continue to be denied in a way that reflects who we are. I'm reminded that those children, of the children that gave the ultimate sacrifice, many did not make it home, and those that did were left with many scars that they carry today. Those children went to a place where it was intended for them to be stripped of their identity, their language, traditions, and customs. I give thanks to their spirits for the sacrifices that were made. I could never forget the message that was given in ceremony, where direction was given to move forward. I pray that we don't conform to a process or conditioned behavior that we have been exposed to over the years, and that we don't follow suit to those institutional approaches to teaching our children moving forward. I think about one of the elders who recently left us, Marianne Trudeau. She came to teach us the language at the River Road School in Sagamok, and this was in the early 70s. And this had to be done under the cloak of secrecy to the funders, because they wouldn't allow such to happen. We don't have to do that anymore. We have an opportunity to design an education system that reflects us and deliver a curriculum in a way that promotes who we are as Nishnawik, Alqueone, Mushkegowuk. In Sagamok, we had an immersion approach where language immersion was provided from kindergarten to grade 3 several years ago, but we drifted away from that. We saw how those who were afforded this language opportunity under the leadership of our elders conducted themselves as adults, which was different from those who were not afforded that opportunity. When we pushed away our elders who were teaching the language and focused only on academic credentials, it was reflected in the behavior of our community. We endeavor once again to look at the language immersion in our community. It's for our future, for our communities to be well, and a lot of that is rooted in who we are, based on the teachings that were given in the language, all of which is not considered in the funding formula in place now. Marginalization and minimization continues. No more can we be passive about the distinct education needs of our children. 2022 marks the 50th anniversary of the adoption of the Indian Control of Indian Education policy paper. Chiging First Nation elder Louis Debaskiba was one of the young leaders who insisted on education sovereignty on our behalf 50 years ago. Let's not let another 50 years go by. It will be with the same fierce insistence of Louis Ba that will be needed by leadership today for the realization of First Nation-led education systems where our languages, cultures, and histories flourish. Article 14 of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples upholds the right to establish and control our education systems. UNDRIP Act passed last year by Canada states unequivocally, Canada rejects all forms of colonialism and must align its laws with UNDRIP, which includes Article 14. Yet, Canada's current approach to education transformation is restrictive and limiting. There are no better people than community leaders themselves to tell and defend their right to quality education. The First Nations with Schools Collective therefore seeks political advocacy support for the approach identified in the pilot proposal needed for education transformation. Miigwech.
Miigwech and Chief French, do you have any comments?
Miigwech. I just wanted to share that Chippewas of the Thames, we are a member of the First Nation with Schools Collective. And the collective is comprised of distinct First Nations And we each have like distinct languages, custom practices, and human resources that are resurgent in different ways, and in different ways in our communities. The pilot project, or the pilot proposal seeks a true nation-to-nation process for negotiations between Canada and participating First Nations. The pilot proposal will seek an alternative way, a pathway to negotiations called the Joint Education Technical Table, which has parties sitting together as equals, mandated to address school capital, language immersion, and other education system components distinctly needed for our communities. As a community participating in the First Nations with Schools Collective Internation Table, putting forth this resolution today, we invite your support of the First Nation with School Collective pilot proposal. The pilot proposal will allow us to seek the nation-nation process for negotiations between Canada and participating First Nations. We seek to maintain autonomy over education affairs and participate in the collective only to advance our individual vision over control of our education. Therefore, any political advocacy by you in this assembly today is greatly appreciated as we forge a new way forward in education negotiations with the Crown. Miigwech.
Thank you. So I'd like to open the floor for comments. Any comments? And comments at all?
Chief Shining Turtle.
Chief Shining Turtle, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I just some follow-up on section 2 of the therefore be it resolved. Is there a distinction between FNWSC and FSNWSC apostrophe S? So it's on the third last line down onto the right. You see under initiative that says FSNWSC apostrophe S initiative. Is that different than FNWSC up at the top in B or A?
I'd invite the mover, the seconder,
Yeah,
to
just a
provide
question.
clarification.
Please. Thank you.
Okay, we apologize for the typo because of the use of the acronyms. No, they are not different. We're referring to the same.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So I just wanted to make this comment then that the dominant English language and the Eurocentric discourse, I think it's tragically diminished our Indigenous languages and our knowledge. And it's contributed largely to the discontinuity and the trauma we all face and see and experience. And the suffering's real. So I really support this resolution. Miigwech.
So any final comments, questions, clarification? Okay, questions called. Okay, so all those against? Against? So anybody against? Okay, any abstentions? Abstentions? Oh, I see. Can you go to one of the mics and state your name? Do you want your abstention noted on the record? Okay, on mic 1.
Matthew Anges, proxy for Casablanca. The reason why I'm abstaining is I don't know much about the work that they've been doing. I support the idea, but I know they're asking for money, and I know there's other projects going on a similar basis, so I just don't fully understand the intent of it. Thanks.
Miigwech? Any other abstentions? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? Please raise your hand as high as you can. Okay, resolution is passed. Okay, so our final resolution is Resolution 2213A. Oh, goodness. All right, so therefore, this is moved by Chief Christopher Plain and seconded by Chief Ogama Shining Turtle. I'm going to read the therefore be it resolved. Number 1, call on the Government of Ontario to extend the nursing retention incentive to include federally funded nurses employed by First Nations. And 2, direct the Chiefs of Ontario, the Ontario Chiefs Committee on Health and Health Coordination Unit to advocate for this initiative. At this point in time, I'd like to invite the mover or the seconder to provide comments on the resolution. And just to check if Chief Plain or Chief Shining Turtle are with us. Chief Plain? Ogama Pelche?
I'll stand in for Chief Plain for this resolution.
Okay. Would you like to provide comments?
Yes, I think the nurses should be receiving the same benefits that provincial nurses received. So, miigwech.
Miigwech. And Ogama Shining Turtle, any comments?
You know, this is an issue of fairness, equality, and it's just not there. So this needs to be changed. So this needs to be supported. Miigwech. And hats off to all our nurses and all our frontline staff that did just yeoman's work through every phase of the pandemic. They were in all the trenches, and they deserve our applause. Miigwech.
Miigwech, I'd like to open the floor for any comments. Any comments, questions, clarifications? I think I have to call one more time. Okay, questions called. So those opposed? Any opposition? Opposition? Okay, seeing none. Any abstentions? Any abstentions? Abstentions? All right, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Aye. All right, the resolution is passed. So that finishes the resolutions for today. I'd like to make an announcement before I forget. This evening, there's an annual Chiefs Assembly social event hosted by the Independent First Nations. Wednesday, that's happening this evening from 7 to 11 p.m. in the York Room, which is in the South Tower at the lower level, and there will be laboratory tea there. At this point, I would like to invite Elder Barney Batiste to deliver his Elder's Reflection, as well as Kieran Davis from the OFNYPC to deliver the Youth Reflection.
So I want to thank you and know that I would just love to keep rolling on into the resolutions and have all of them done. We have a few more that we need to take into consideration. Hopefully you'll read them and come to tomorrow morning real bright and early and happy to continue with resolutions. I will continue. However, the elders have asked us to ensure that they have this space at 5:30 to do the work that they want to do. So we're going to move ourselves along and let that happen, and know they will keep us all in their best thoughts. Any other announcements in terms of our evening other than your big invite to the social? And I understand that when we were in camera, that we went straight to the minister, and we understood that it was just a minute in time in terms of finishing off that in-camera session and our discussions with the national chief. And yes, it should have had a motion, but however, I understand that a couple of chiefs have made the point, and we take it up here in our work, and we'll make those notes. So I want to thank you very much. Enjoy your evening, and miigwech. Oh, no, sorry. Elder Batiste. And the youth reflection. Youth reflections, Darren Fox.
It'll be Elder Barney Batiste and Youth Rep Kieran Davis delivering their reflections.
Bonjour. Nijo Gabo Nindishtikas, Nijo Kanem Nindishtikas, Mizan Nindodem, Obishko Kang, Nindoji. I am a Two-Spirit youth on the OFN YPC, and I represent Treaty 3. I'd like to acknowledge our sacred items in the room and the drum, and Elder Harvey Bell for this morning's smudge, and it set good intentions for the day. And I'd like to thank Elder Mark Anderson, Terry Fiddler, Barney Baptiste for opening prayer, and we're very grateful for their time and spoken words. So today, for me, it was a lot of reflection, and a lot of eye-opening topics were spoken today. And I spent a lot of my afternoon, the majority of my afternoon, with the elders, and the elders have shown me to use my voice. And today was a very informative day. I also want to acknowledge Pride. I meant to start with that as well. It's Happy Pride Month for our Two-Spirit folks. Love the flag. And I just started publicly speaking, so in March. So excuse me for this. At lunch today, thank you. At lunch today, we had the chance to speak with our national chief, Roseanne Archibald, and we got to introduce ourselves and our roles with this council. And we got to speak about our Two-Spirit initiatives that are happening in not only Ontario, but all of Canada. And so it was very informative and great to see what work is being done and what work is to come through that. And after lunch, the OFN YPC had the chance to meet with the elders to talk about the discussions this morning. And speaking with the elders, I got to speak with them and share a little bit of my story and my upbringing. And afterwards, after their meeting, I was told to use my voice, like we are the youth, we are gonna carry it tomorrow. Like we're the next leaders. And I want to say that I stand behind you chiefs here before me today, and I'm proud to carry this on with me in my journey and with our council's journey. There's a lot of good things being done here, a lot of topics that have been needed to talk about. I just want to say thank you to everyone that has come out and has been listening. I'm miigwech. Have a good evening.
Yeah, I haven't been here most of the day, although I did look at the robust conversation that we had with the Métis situation. We met the elders met for, about a couple hours there. And we're also going to, we had a real good discussion around it as well, to which we'll be presenting a resolution and a declaration from us around the same subject matter. But I imagine everybody's had their pretty full day by this time. I want to thank you for being here for all this time, all today. It's these meetings are always like this, aren't they? It kind of gets a little bit tiresome towards the end. So I'm just going to say everybody have a good evening, and let only the good spirits guide you. And yeah, that's good. Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Very good, Miigwech. Thank you. Just a reminder, there's the social tonight. It's happening, I think it's 7 o'clock. The York Room, 7 to 11 tonight. You're welcome to attend. Please wear an orange shirt if you have one. Also a reminder, this room will be locked for the protection of the Eagle staff and the sacred items that are here. So with that, Miigwech, we'll see you tomorrow morning. Have a good evening.